Hello, everybody, and welcome to another DCT Recruitment's The Icing on the Career Cake. Today, we're going to be speaking to the wonderful Tom Phillips, and I've just been told off before we go on air about telling dad jokes, so I shall refrain for the whole of the session. But Tom, you can tell your best dad joke if you like.
God, what's my best dad joke? There's one I like that comes out every Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is
It's a cracker, that one, isn't it?
Well, there are loads. Did you hear about the dyslexic devil worshipper?
Go for it.
Sold his soul to Santa.
Yes. Brilliant. Oh, look at
How is your comedy going, Phil? Tom?
It's been going okay, yeah. So, funny enough, it's almost a year to the day since we did the big kind of charity gig for, my money went to Alder Hay, so that was cool. And I've been doing a few kind of open mic nights around Liverpool and the Northwest ever since. I usually do about 1 or 2 a month just to sort of keep my hand in. But yeah, it's going okay. And I'm going to be launching a new venture soon connected with that. So
amazing. Can you tell it?
Yeah. I mean, so basically the company I worked with last year was, I would say, pretty poorly organised, and the training you were meant to get was almost non-existent. It was a bit of a shambles, but they quite happily took the money and ran. So I'm going to launch my own version. We're going to offer people a chance to come and train to be stand-up comedians. We'll do a big gig and hopefully raise some money for charity along the way. And for me, it's a lot more than just doing stand-up comedy. I mean, it's having the confidence to stand up in the first place, because we know that public speaking is the #1 phobia in the world. Doing stand-up comedy is like public speaking on steroids. I mean, I'm used to speaking in public. I've done it all my career. But doing stand-up was a stretch for me. So for a lot of people, it'd be the icing on the cake, if you like. And
very good. Segue the title in. Yeah.
And I think, if you can handle that and overcome that fear, then, what else can you overcome? What else is holding you back in life that you don't need to be held back by anymore? So yeah, watch this space.
Yeah, baptism by fire, they call that.
It is, and it's kind of, real. I think most people will tell you that when they did it last year, we put a lot of time and effort into our 5-minute sets, and you come off stage buzzing. You want to get straight back on again. I believe it's like doing a parachute jump. Most people do parachute jumps just want to get straight back in the plane and do another one.
Yeah, I genuinely think that a lot of people should do stand-up comedy. I really do. Yeah, I really do. Have you ever done stand-up, Diane? Never done it?
No.
You should do. You might need to get a box,
Yeah.
Yeah. So they can see you from the back, but.
Yeah. Oh, so you can see me.
Yeah.
Thanks, Graham. No. I don't know. I've presented in front of probably maybe 500 plus people, being a trainer, but never done comedy. No. I think it's
I think any of those milestones in terms of speaking really, really help you.
Yeah.
Really, really help you.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to do. And like I say, if you can get over that fear, what else can you get over that's holding you back in life?
No, absolutely. You wouldn't necessarily know this, but my school report used to say that I don't speak enough. Honestly.
Yeah.
And my school report was full of never really speaks up in class, wish he had a bit more confidence to speak up, and then look at all of the things I've done in my career. I've DJ'd in front of 3,500 people, Cafe Royal in London. I've stood in front of crowds of about 30,000 people comparing on main stages. I've done radio. I've had my own radio show. I've got, an award-winning podcast or whatever. Honestly, it's built from experience after experience, and you build as you have those experiences.
Yeah. Absolutely. The more good experiences you have, the more confident you become as well. So
absolutely,
one good thing leads to another.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about what it is you do.
So I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I specialize in helping people with stress and anxiety. That includes PTSD and complex PTSD on the stress side of things, anxiety, general anxiety, and social anxiety under the anxiety banner. do a lot of work with people who have phobias, because that generally tends to hold them back in life. And I've had all sorts of interesting phobias come up. Probably the most interesting one was a woman who had a phobia of marshmallows. That was actually in a workshop we were doing. So we do a lot of corporate work as well, and we do an exercise where you have to build a tower out of spaghetti and marshmallows. And as soon as the marshmallows appeared, this woman just went white and nearly passed out. She'd nearly suffocated on one when she was a kid because her brother had stuck it up her nose. So, understandably, there's a lot of fear there. But that was 30 years ago, and she was still kind of carrying it. Do phobia work. At the moment, bizarrely, doing a lot of imposter syndrome. A lot of people seem to be struggling with that. Corporately, I tend to work at a leadership and exec level. So I do a lot of coaching at that level. And interestingly, a lot of those coaching sessions are turning into therapy sessions because there's a lot of stress and uncertainty out in the world, so we say, and particularly some of the sectors I deal with. So, the NHS is my biggest client. I'm working with a lot of consultants, a lot of chief execs, a lot of directors of HR or finance to help improve their performance. But inevitably during those sessions, there's something comes out and starts turning into more of a therapy session. I did a bit of smoking, a bit of weight loss. Don't do too much of that. Main reason being that a lot of people think that hypnosis is like a magic wand and they only have to see you and that's it. But you've actually really got to want to stop smoking or stop overeating for hypnosis to work. Otherwise, it's like a stick in plaster. So if anybody comes to me and I ask them where they are 1 to 10, if they're any less than a 9, I'm like, we'll come back when you're a 9 because it's not going to work. It's not a magic pill that you just take. So that's on the personal side. I have a very different model to most therapists. I only work with people for 5 weeks, and in that time, so far, 99% of my clients have been absolutely brilliant and they've been able to move on without me. And obviously that's better for them emotionally, psychologically. It's also better for them financially because they're not having to pay for session after session after session. So it's better for their bank accounts. I've only ever had one woman who came back after the 5 weeks and she was interesting because she was, have you seen Baby Reindeer?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was my Martha. She was my stalker. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't spot it at the time. Got to 5 weeks and she was in a much better place from where she came in. And she said, "Oh, can I come back?" I said, "Well, I don't think you need to come back. I think you're okay. And it's your time. It's your money if you want to come back." And she kept coming back. And after about 7 or 8 sessions, she said, "Oh, can we go for a drink one night?" I was like, that's when the kind of light bulb went on. I was like, no, that would be unethical. And also, having been treating you, I know what's going on in your head. So that's not well. So I had to let her down firmly but gently. So again, slightly different model to most therapists. Corporately, we do a lot of workshop on psychological safety. That's a real hot topic at the moment in many sectors. How do you create teams and organizations where people feel safe psychologically to speak up, to disagree, to get into conflict, which are all actually really good things to have within a company. Or a lot of places don't have that security and people don't feel like they can speak up. And that causes lots of problems. I mean, there's classic cases where that's actually caused disasters. So, the Challenger space disaster, that was caused by a lack of psychological safety. A little bit closer to home, the North Staff's kind of hospital scenario that we saw back in 2014, 15, whatever it was, that was, a classic case of not having psychological safety. So doing a lot of work on that as well. A lot of workshops on conflict management, because that's a big problem in a lot of organizations, certainly places like the NHS, unfortunately. That tends to keep me busy.
Yeah. Do you know the conflict management, Tom? Do you think, because I used to teach that, do you feel like as the generations have changed, what they see as conflict and what is discussed, has that changed within your sessions?
I don't think the nature of conflict has changed, but I think people are more willing to talk about it now because the basic definition of conflict is any time you have a difference of opinion, and that happens in work all the time, happens in our personal lives all the time. The big difference in our personal lives is that usually when we're in conflict with people, we have a much deeper level of rapport with them. So it's our spouses, our kids, our siblings, our parents. We're more inclined to say what we feel and what we think, but we don't carry that into the workplace in a lot of cases. And once people realize that that's the basic definition of conflict, they are then more likely to say, actually, I disagree, or I think that's the wrong idea, or I'm not happy, or, we kind of need to really think about this before we move on. So I think there's more of a willingness to discuss it. But I think the things that people get into conflict about are still the same today as they probably were sort of 10 or 15 years ago. It's about having different ideas and, I've got this idea, this is how I think we should move forward, and somebody else has got different ideas, so what do we do? What's the best way forward? So does that answer your question?
Yeah. Do you think that if you don't create spaces in the right places for conflict, do you think that it then gets moved sideways and it comes out somewhere else?
100%. So one of the models we use a lot at the moment, it's called Patrick Lencioni's 5 behaviors, really common model. It's been around since the 1990s. The great thing is now you can do questionnaires on it as an individual, you can do questionnaires on it as a team, and it's got 5 behaviors. So it starts with trust, then it goes to conflict, then it goes to commitment, then it goes to accountability, then it goes to results. So the first behavior, if you build trust, you should be able to have healthy conflict, because people feel that it's okay to say, I disagree, I don't understand, I need help, I've made a mistake. And when you get to the next behavior, which is conflict, people feel, again, a lot safer to say, I disagree, I think this is the wrong way to go, I think this is what we should be doing. And when you have that, even if your idea is not the idea that gets implemented or gets taken up, you feel like you've had your say, you feel like you've been able to say what you thought was important, and hopefully you can then get behind whatever idea does get implemented. When you don't have that, that's when people leave meetings having kind of made a superficial agreement, but then they go away and they either don't get behind the action plan, they do their own thing, and that causes real problems, because the next meeting you have, you've all committed to doing stuff and everyone's going, yeah, well, I didn't do it because I didn't actually agree. So yes, it definitely surfaces other places. It also causes a lot of festering resentments, because when you sat in a meeting and you feel like you really want to say something, but you feel like you can't because you're going to get bullied. We talk about the 3 R's. We talk about psychological safety. So you should be able to say what you want within reason, without fear of reprisal, rejection, or ridicule. Okay. So the rejection piece is, I feel safe to say what I'm going to say without getting ostracized by the team because it's a stupid idea. But there's no such thing as a stupid idea. It might be the idea that saves the company. I feel safe to say what I say without ridicule. People aren't going to laugh at me and, make jokes at my expense because my idea is a little bit different. Well, because I'm the one that says I disagree and I put the brakes on a process until we've kind of thrashed it out. And certainly without fear of reprisal. Unfortunately, a lot of organizations, a lot of sectors, there's still a bullying culture. And if you dare to challenge the boss, that's going to come back and bite you in the bum. That's what we saw at North Staffs. And you don't want to be in that situation. So, yes, it will manifest itself outside of the meeting where the conflict should take place.
Yeah, I was thinking that, it was going to move to things like social media, for example, as well. I mean, you see a lot of extreme behavior online, don't you? And I think a part of that is a manifestation of people not being able to release that.
Yeah, there's
elsewhere.
I think there's a certain amount of frustration. There's a certain amount of venting, isn't it, that goes on online, and you always get those messages going, oh my God, I can't believe it, I'm so upset. And then straight away everybody's going, oh, what's up? DM me and whatever. And everyone's going, no, it's okay, don't want to talk about it. Well, I'll put it on social media then. Yeah. And if you feel that upset and that aggrieved, go and talk to somebody about it. Yeah. Preferably a coach or a mentor or, some kind of counselor or therapist, somebody that's going to give you an objective viewpoint rather than a subjective one.
Yeah.
The big problem you got is, certainly in the workplace, you go and vent your spleen to one of your mates in the workplace and they start to sympathize with you rather than empathize, and you just end up winding each other up. What you need is somebody who can empathize to say, okay, look, I understand that you're angry about that, or you're upset, or you're disappointed about it. I don't share those feelings, so what are you going to do about it? Rather than just kind of jumping into bed and going, oh my God, yeah, it's terrible, the boss shouldn't have said this, and Karen shouldn't have said that, and this shouldn't have been done, and you just end up basically winding each other up, and your emotions become even more intense rather than actually looking at it objective and going, okay, well, what do we do about that? If you're not happy about it, if you're upset, if you're disappointed, what are you going to do about it?
It's kind of nature, though, isn't it? And I wanted to bring you in on this, Dan, but it is kind of nature to think, especially if you're younger or you're just less experienced and you're just coming into a company, is to think, well, I've got to be careful with what I say here, and I can't really let people know what I think. It's kind of
absolutely. So this is where your leadership team, your management team is so important in terms of the culture they create, and again, making that space for people to feel psychologically safe. So from the get-go, they know that young people and even older people entering a new organization, getting used to the culture of the organization, need to feel like it's a place where they can challenge and where they can disagree and where they can ask for help and where they can admit their mistakes. that is very much a kind of function of the leadership team within the organization, no matter how small or how big it is, to say, right, you know what, there's a psychological safety here. You are empowered to disagree with me as the boss because I don't have all the answers, and you may have a better idea and I want to hear it.
Yeah.
And there's also, I think, an emphasis then on team leaders. You know, when you're in those team meetings and scenarios and you're talking about Project X or Plan A or whatever it is, to actually draw out the quieter people, because you'll always have the more vocal people in the team and the quiet ones tend to sit back. But there's a real emphasis and there's a real skill on the bosses to be able to say, okay, look, you know, Diane, you've been very quiet and I know you've got some strong ideas about this. Let's hear it. You know, so you've really got to bring people out. Otherwise, the quiet people will sit there, you know, they'll be shouted down by the louder people with the best of intentions. And they, as I say, they might have the one idea that's going to save the company, but they don't articulate it because they feel like they don't have the experience, or they feel like everybody else has got better ideas. And this is where, you know, imposter syndrome starts to kick in a little bit, because we kind of sit there and we all do this. We think, oh, you know, they're really good at this. Their ideas must be the best ideas because they keep saying what it is and we keep doing what they say. Was actually your idea could be just as valid, if not more so, but you haven't articulated and got it out on the table.
Diane, do you find that, like, especially even at like interview level, you get, you know, some organizations maybe lose out with people that are very capable just because they don't push enough? They don't create that kind of challenge at interview level?
Yeah, I do. Because sometimes the conversation and how the candidate come across to us, like when then you're hearing feedback from the client, it feels like you're hearing somebody else that you've spoken to. So that can go to how have they felt welcomed, or how have they felt, or what's the situation been like. You know, I try my best to go to most of my clients to see the location, what the office is like, to see, feel a culture, look at things, so you can prepare the candidates. So going back to when we had Brett on, when I went and met him, like his office was like up pure flights of stairs this steep. So then I was a bit like to the girl, don't wear high heels to go up them stairs. And like when I was trying to find the location, I was literally outside it because there's a different name above the building to theirs. I couldn't see their logo, and there was a whole like outside it. So it helps then if I do that to settle people, because I trigger a conflict. It will be nervousness. It will be the unknown. So, you know, if it feels like that, and also try and prepare the client to say, you know, does your receptionist know that they're coming? It'd be nice if they walk in and go, hi, Graham, you're here to meet Tom for your interview. Would you like a drink? Would you like this? Familiarity then settles people down, because people are nervous naturally, aren't they, when they're going to go for a job interview? So they can probably either miscommunicate things or just not be the best version of themselves at times within it. So yeah, it can come, but that's where we try and do them things a little bit extra to make people feel as comfortable as possible and like informed as much as they can be, you know, before they go.
Tom, where does neurodivergence sit in this as well? Because like my youngster, who is young at 9, I mean, he'll have an answer for everything. I mean, he'll purposely seek out conflict in a way, because he, you know, he'll think faster than somebody else. He'll say what he, you know, his mind says, which is a great thing, you know, and ultimately is a wonderful tool to have in a way. But of course, you know, at school, what happens is you then get into kind of a situation of conflict resolution all of the time, because, you know, these teachers will go, well, he's naughty. Well, he's not naughty. I mean, his brain works in a different way. He challenges, and, you know, he looks at things from a different perspective from other people. But how does that impact this whole area of conflict resolution?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head already, and it's having an awareness. If you are in a position of authority, so whether you're a teacher, a team leader, a manager, or whatever, having that awareness that, you know, more and more people now would be under that banner of what we describe as neurodiversity, and whatever form of neurodiversity that takes, having the awareness of it, having structures and plans in place that allow you to understand why people behave in a certain way. So, we're doing a certain amount of workshops on how to communicate with neurodivergent people within your organization. I'm not entirely sure what goes on in schools, but I think there is still a tendency to label people that their behaviors outside the kind of what we would call norms, to say that they're naughty or they're disruptive. And I mean, I saw this with my brother 40 years ago, because he is dyslexic. And my parents had a real battle with the school to get him recognized as such, because they just kept saying he was a troublemaker. And you kind of look at where he's got to now. He's been extremely successful in life. Actually lived out in Moscow for 17 years, built a business out there, came back 2 years ago at the start of the trouble with the Ukraine. But interestingly, we saw a similar thing with his kids, because they came in from basically it was an American education system that was running the academies in Russia. Real sharp cookies, not afraid to say what they were thinking or feeling. And a lot of their teachers in the schools they went to in England found that really, really challenging. So he was getting several phone calls saying, your son said this, your daughter said that. And his answer would be, well, what's the problem with that? Yeah, that's the way they've been raised. That's the way they've been trained in their education system. So, I don't think it's the kids that need to change. So I think having that awareness is one thing. But I also think, again, we need to support people that are in those positions, whether it's teachers, leaders, managers. I mean, a lot of the doctors I work with in the NHS, they're aware of neurodivergence, but they don't know how to change their behavior when they're dealing with patients who fall under that banner. So, teaching them how to communicate, and what some of the pitfalls might be when you're dealing with somebody that again falls under that banner of neurodivergence. There's a big education piece to be going on. I think the good thing is we're becoming more aware of it. We're more, I think, willing to embrace it. I mean, I work with certain organizations now, and the first thing they say to me is, if you're going to come in and do a training course for us, how do you adapt your training? So we have to send them a list of policies to say, right, well, we do this for somebody with ADHD or autism, or somebody that's visually impaired or hearing impaired. These are all the adjustments we can make to the training. But what we need, and this is the interesting piece, we need to know in advance that those people do have challenges in those areas. And again, unfortunately, there's still a taboo about it. A lot of people won't admit that they are, or they have ADHD or they are autistic or whatever, because the organizations that they're working in haven't quite got to the point where those individuals feel safe to declare that. So there's still work to be done, but I think we're getting better at it. And I do think it comes down to supporting the people that need the support, which is the teachers, the leaders, the managers, the healthcare workers, whoever it is.
I still think a lot of it's very reactive as opposed to proactive. I still think that organisations tend to go, oh, well, we're building the awareness training, or we're building, learning about this as and when we get a case. And then that's when we need it. It's not done accepting that, as you say. I mean, it's like 1 in 4 people now will be neurodivergent. So it would seem sensible to include that as a kind of broad brush right from the word go, rather than think, oh, let's retrofit this in. But I just think that there's a massive thing out there as well about, a lot of the ways that we've worked in the past just need to change, because they're just not fit for purpose anymore. Are you seeing?
Say that, Graham, you could, any topic, you could probably say that most businesses, the most successful businesses are the ones who are innovative and the heads and the leading edge. They're doing it before everyone else. So, you could talk about sustainability, for instance, what's coming in next year, what businesses are going to do. People won't be prepared for. People will only do it because the government have said we now need to do it. We need to do that. But they're things that the children of today, the young adults of today, they look at a lot more before they go and work for a company. And this is what I explain all the time, is the candidate's assessing the client just as much as the client's assessing them. It's a two-way street. Gone are the days where it's all like, I hope they hire me, I hope this. There's too much choice out there that, they could lose really good candidates because they haven't got all that in there. Culture is how people do things around their business. and you if you walked into an office and they had a policy, for instance, to say, oh, we're really great with neurodivergent people or whatever, but then they see a conversation with someone and it's just not handled in that right way. Well, you can have all the policies in the world, can't you? But you've got to bring them to life. So, you know, if they were a neurodivergent person, then they'd probably go, well, I'm not going to go and work there.
Yeah, it is interesting. I know the companies that they say one thing and then they don't do it, you know, so they're not walking their talk. And interestingly, you know, the comedy training I did last year, one of the first things we noticed is that they booked a venue that was not wheelchair accessible. And one of the best comedians to come out of that, you know, guy called Sam, was in a wheelchair. So for the first couple of sessions, he couldn't go because he couldn't actually physically get into the venue. And eventually they found somewhere that was more wheelchair accessible. So yeah, I think, you know, a lot of companies are saying one thing, not necessarily following it up, or they are, as you say, going very reactive rather than proactive.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of greenwashing. I hope he built his whole routine around that club's inaccessibility.
Sam's great. I mean, he's just you know, he's one of the funniest guys I've ever met. You know, takes the mick out of himself, takes the mick out of his disability. But yeah, I think there was a few digs that went in on the night about the company concerned.
How do you find the fine line between obviously your comedy and being comedy, and then the fact you train a lot on how people should behave and what should be said and what not be said? How do you balance them two things together?
I think the easy answer is I don't. Yeah. I think if you go and see a stand-up comedy, it's an open mic night. You know you're likely to see and hear all sorts. Okay, and if you're going to be offended, don't go. It's like
a joke. It's a joke, isn't it?
Well, you know, there's this whole debate. It's you know, you've heard all the horror stories about people complaining about Ricky Gervais and Jimmy Carr having watched their comedy shows in the entirety. I'm like, what were you expecting? Like, you know, a lecture on the Bible. If you're not offended, don't go. Yeah. If you think there's a slight risk that you're going to be offended, do not go, because you're going to hear all sorts. I mean, my comedy routine is fairly blue. I do tell a few jokes about psychotherapy. Okay. I tell a lot of jokes about my time working with gynecologists, so you can imagine where that humor goes. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know, I've not had anybody come up to me and say, yeah, that was really offensive. You know, everybody gets it. You're there to have a laugh, and I think God knows we need a lot of that in the world today. But if you know, I also think as well, if that's the sort of thing you're going to complain about, you know, there's obviously a lot more that needs to go on in your life.
I mean, that's the thing that Jimmy Carr says all the time, isn't it? It's a joke. It's a joke, you know.
And Jimmy Carr is a really, really intelligent guy. You know, I've been listening to his audiobook, and you know, he is a really intelligent. I think he went to was at Cambridge or Oxford. You know, not that that's a measure of IQ, but really, really intelligent guy. You know, and loads of people love him. That's why he keeps selling out his shows and his Netflix specials and all the rest of it. So I just think you know, if you're the sort of person that's going to be offended, don't go to a comedy show. Certainly don't go to a comedy show where you're going to have, I don't know, 10, a dozen, you know, aspiring comedians standing up and talking about everything and anything.
And definitely don't sit right at the front.
No, well, you probably will get picked on. You know, but
I was in a comedy thing, and the guy heckled me, and he still had his tag on, you know, on his top. So I was like, don't be rude to me when you haven't even took your tag off your top. So you're taking that back to River Island tomorrow, and it went viral, the clip. And I was like,
it's
a nice one.
You know, don't sit around, whatever you do, wherever you're sitting, don't heckle a comedian, because they are just going to destroy you. You know, Jimmy Carr does it brilliantly, Ricky Gervais does it brilliantly, Mickey Flanagan does it brilliantly.
Well, that's what they want. That is what they want.
We love it. You know, we probably spend more time training how to deal with hecklers than we do on our routines. You know, we got our put downs lined up, and then we just wait for somebody to say something, and it's like, right, you have just declared open season on yourself.
Yeah, and you know that again, that's a useful skill to learn, isn't it? To be able to think very quickly off of your feet, and also have some form of knowledge of where this might go as well. I mean, that's the other thing that you learn in doing anything like stand-up comedy or doing radio, or both of which I've done in the past as well. That a lot of people start conversations thinking, I'm definitely going to go just this way, and not listening, because that in both of those things, both of those areas, one of the key things is that you have to react and you have to listen. Yeah, comedians will interact with the audience. They need that interaction because it makes it seem 100% that it's live just for that night. You're building in elements that can only happen that night with that group of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, just on a more general, that we are undoubtedly going through tough times at the moment. It's tough for everybody. Yeah, so we need more laughter in the world. We definitely need more laughter. We need to put smiles on people's faces, get them laughing, because we know psychologically, as soon as you start smiling, as soon as you start to laugh, you completely change your internal makeup. You start to release all your happy hormones. So you've probably heard of the dose effect, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, all the things that make you feel good. So if you can smile and you can laugh and you can do that, so you can go and see a comedy show, whether it's a professional comedian or it's just your local stand-ups, and have a laugh, that I think is great medicine for you. It's great therapy. And I try and use that as much as I can in my sessions and in my corporate workshops to a certain extent, because I think to get people laughing, it takes a lot of pressure, takes a lot of the edge off. I mean, with my one-to-one clients, I actually use a technique called therapeutic swearing. So I get them swearing their heads off, which they love. They absolutely love, because they swear, they vent, and they have a laugh and they have a giggle about it. And I was doing it yesterday. So I was at Wellness in the City yesterday, with Claire and her team. Yeah. Doing a session on imposter syndrome, and talking about one of the ways you can deal with imposter syndrome is just to have a good swear at yourself. We had 10 people in the room all swearing, and they all absolutely loved it. So I think the more you can laugh, the more you can make laughter part of your day-to-day life, and certainly make it part of your job, the better off you're going to be at the end of the day.
Well, there's only two things that you need to be really good at hypnotizing people around, Tom, which is making them laugh at your jokes and making them pay your bill. I mean, surely... Right?
It's So I'm not good enough to make them laugh at all my jokes yet, but I am.
But you can make them pay your bill. Brilliant. Well, that's you're sorted on that account then.
Well, again, I mean, my model is you pay up front, and you don't pay by the session. You pay for the results.
Have you ever had it where you couldn't hypnotize somebody?
No. Everybody I've worked with has been. It depends on what you think hypnosis is. So I'll tell you what hypnosis is not. Hypnosis is not about falling asleep. It's not about being unconscious. Now, some people do fall asleep when they come in for sessions, and that's actually a good thing, because it means that they feel safe and they feel secure. None of us go to sleep when we're not feeling safe, we're not feeling secure.
I do that when I have my hair cut.
Well, you must feel, it must be really relaxing for you. It must be really
exactly. Yeah,
absolutely. So
get some funny haircuts, but it's
well, I remember those days, a long time ago, but I do remember them. And hypnosis is just about being in a much deeper state of relaxation, because then it's a lot easier to talk to your subconscious, and that's where all the stuff's going on that we need to deal with. Because in relative terms, your subconscious is the size of a beach ball, whereas your conscious mind is only the size of a golf ball. So if we can tap into that by making you more relaxed, then that's absolutely great. And a lot of the time when you're being hypnotized, I and other therapists, we want to talk to you, we want to get answers, we want to get things coming out. So we need you to kind of be, at a state where you can answer those questions if you want, and if you need to. So everybody can be hypnotized. Some people are a little bit more resistant than others, but we actually hypnotize ourselves every day. We just don't realize it. We call it daydreaming. When you daydream, you've gone into a hypnotic state. Most people will relate to this. So you've driven somewhere and you get to your destination, you can't remember half the journey. You were hypnotized. You were in a different state of consciousness.
It's really worrying, that, isn't it?
Well, because consciously you're well aware of everything that's going on. Yeah. Subconsciously you're thinking about the destination. You're thinking about where you've just left. You're thinking about what you're going to do when you get there. You sit down at your computer and you look up and you think 20 minutes has gone by, and it's 2 hours later. You've been in a hypnotic state. It's absolutely great. It's really funny. I had a client came to see me a couple of years ago, an older lady who was suffering from social anxiety, and she was that bad she couldn't come in on her own. So her son brought her in, and he was in his 40s or 50s. She's in her 70s. So the first session, I'm sat talking to her like I'm sat talking to you, and he sat behind me. I think he was on his phone or whatever. So we spent about an hour talking, and I was getting a history off her, trying to figure out what was going on. I think I got to where it was. So I said, okay, I'm going to get you to relax. I'm going to start taking you down. So basically get to close her eyes, put on my best Barry White voice, start taking her down, getting her to relax. And as I'm doing this to her, all I heard from behind me was gone, completely gone. He was just totally out of it. So his mum opened her eyes, and I was just like, shh, just leave him. He obviously needs it. So eventually, when I brought it back up and he came back up, he's like, oh, what just happened? I said, well, I think you just doubled your bill. That's what's just happened.
It's been on the meter all the time.
So going back to your question, Diane, some people are a bit more resistant, but everybody can be hypnotized.
Yeah,
that's lovely. I used to drive to London on a regular basis, commute from work, quite a long commute from Somerset, and there's a bit where there's double speed cameras either side of the road, and I'd have this situation that you were talking about where you, like, some days you just can't remember the journey particularly, but it send me into blind panic, because I'd be like, did I slow down for the speed cameras? Didn't I guess I did, because I'd never got a ticket, so I must have always done it. But the thing is, you just kind of subconsciously do it, yeah, or yeah. It creates enough of a physical reaction to actually do it, but you can't remember it at all. Very, very worrying, I think.
No, you can't. But again, the way your brain works and your conscious and subconscious works, there are certain parts of your brain that will look out for danger. So if you've trained it that this part of the dual carriageway, this part of the motorway has got speed cameras on it, it will slow you down subconsciously, because it knows there's a penalty involved if you don't slow down.
Yeah, well, we've got one of those stupid hire cars at the moment. It does it all for you. I think it's as dangerous a thing there is. It even like immediately stops you if you get too close to the car in front. What kind of nonsense is that?
Safety.
Yeah, that's a good feature, because my car does that. It will tell me if I'm going over the speed limit, but it won't slow me down over the speed limit. Although you can put speed limiters on your car, can't you? I mean, that's been a feature for years.
I was going to say mine was that way. You can put cruise control on, and it'll speed up and slow down to what's in front of it and just drive. Yeah.
I loved it when cruise control first came out. Loads of people thought that literally they could just take their hands off the steering wheel. You had all of these reports in the papers about like people like they're doing like 70 down the motorway, and they just hit the central reservation where they but I had the cruise control on. Yeah, it didn't steer the car for you. Nowadays,
it was a really famous case in America. I think it was like some woman sued Winnebago because she bought a big camper van, put it on cruise control, and then thought she could actually go in the back and make herself a coffee while it was driving down. You've got to be careful, but I mean, interestingly, there's a big comparison here. Most of us live most of our lives on cruise control. We do everything automatically. We don't think about it. We just get up and do it, and that makes sense to a certain extent, because if you had to think about everything you did on a daily basis, you go insane. So you jump out of bed, you jump in the shower, you brush your teeth, you do all of that without thinking about it.
Well, I was going to say, actually, in some of the other sort of office culture podcasts that I take part in, one of the big shifts that's happened over the last couple of years is more and more leaders are now talking about not absenteeism but presenteeism. Is that something that you're seeing with some of the groups you deal with?
No, I don't think we're seeing it overtly, but I think people are in general talking about more living in the moment and actually being present in the moment and not being distracted by your phones and being on social media and surfing the web or whatever. Actually being in the room with people is really, really important. I think as a leader that should have been something that we've been doing since year dot, because if you're not present for your people, how do you expect to lead them? How do you expect to know them, understand what motivates them, what demotivates them? I think we definitely need to be there. So I think I would say I'm probably seeing more people talking about and being aware of being in the moment, rather than having a head in the clouds.
Yeah,
that's easier said than done, isn't it? When everyone's got one of those.
Again, that just takes training and education. I mean, I have all my notifications switched off, so my phone doesn't distract me, or distracts me as little as possible. And I have an app on mine which, as soon as I go onto, or if I go into WhatsApp, I go into my emails, I go onto Facebook, or whatever, it pings up and says, right, 1 minute, and then it starts a timer. So that
Right.
when I get to 1 minute, I know I've spent a minute doing what I don't need to do, but it's just a diversion, and I can put it down again. So you like most things, like you can discipline yourself to do it.
Yeah.
Again, one of the big problems, with social media is the effect it has on our dopamine levels and the quick spikes that we get, and we're looking for that instant gratification. We're not built as machines or human beings to kind of do that. We've always had dopamine, but back in the day when we were cavemen, our dopamine used to rise slowly throughout the day as we went on the hunt, and then you'd kill something, you'd feel satisfied. Yeah, but it'd taken a long time for that dopamine level to rise, and then it would kind of subside slowly. And now we've got that instant spike all the time. Every time you go on social media and you're looking to see who's liked your posts or who's commented on your posts or whatever, and because your body tries to maintain homeostasis, as soon as you get that spike, it tries to bring you straight back down again. Yeah, that's why we've got this constant battle all the time, this constant imbalance.
Do you ever find that the conversation about AI comes into any of this at all as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I love AI. I think it's great. I think we should be embracing it. I think it's a tool that you can use for the good. I mean, I think it works on so many levels. A lot of leaders I work with, I say, look, if you use AI to do certain things for you, it frees you up for more time to do what's important, which is spend time with your people. So you get AI to crunch your numbers, do your analysis, look at your figures, whatever you need to look at. That's great.
Although there's a lot of figures that are now showing that actually all it does is make people busier, because they just people are demanding more in less time.
Yeah, this brings in this whole idea of toxic productivity. And I'm doing loads of stuff, but am I doing the right things? And am I doing within my kind of my time for the day? Where am I building in time for me? Am I building in time for other people? So I think we do need to be aware of that. And if using AI saves you 90 minutes a day, use those 90 minutes to speak to your people, or go home earlier and talk to the family and whatever. I was looking up years ago, one of the bosses I had when I worked in pharmaceuticals, he just said, Tom, if you can hit target by staying in bed all day, I'll buy you a new bed.
Right, I think, if people can hit their targets in half the time, then that's fine.
I think I think AI is great. I'm all for embracing it. But interestingly, and this, this was a classic example. I had a client came to see me last week, owns a business, inherited from his father, and came in talking about procrastination. And I could just sense that there was something else going on behind the scenes. I kept pulling the threads. And then eventually, poor guy broke down in tears. Turns out he got divorced 10 years ago. Wow. Hadn't really dealt with the emotional outcome from that, the emotional fallout from that. And that is something I don't think AI will ever do. It will never have that human awareness, that gut instinct, as good as it's ever going to be. It will never, ever be that good. And I love talking to ChatGPT. So I have the voice switch on, my voice function switched on my phone, and I chat to it all the time. And AI, ChatGPT, has reassured me that, computers will never take over the world, and I take its word for it.
Yeah, I think we live in interesting times where actually there's a lot of possibility, but there's a lot of dangers as well. I think there's a massive danger around sort of empty information, lack of proper training, people trying to do quick answers, people suffering burnout because they are expected to do too much. We do need companies to realize that we need to give people time. People used to have time. If you talk to the older generation about how they did certain things in business, sometimes we just allowed people to, walk from one place to another, or just, chew the card or whatever. And all of those things were actually processing time, or giving people time to properly read information and digest it properly. It's important. And that is the kind of danger of these technologies. If we use the technologies to do those things for us, to do the understanding things for us, without us ever absorbing that and being involved in it, then actually the output will be really poor, right? Because we're not putting anything into it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, you've got to have some kind of controls in place to check whatever you get out ChatGPT or Claude or Microsoft Copilot, whatever, you've got to verify it. And that I think will always be there. But I do think that for a lot of the stuff, it makes life so much easier. Yeah, I think it's great. I would fully embrace it.
Yep. Yeah, it needs embracing, but with creativity and with humanness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
At the core.
Before this, I've just had a meeting with a guy, an AI guru, should we say, talking about how maybe we could implement it into our business and stuff. And I was saying, like, I still want to be able to have that human side at the end. And he was like, yeah, you'd have the balance of the two, you know. So if I used it, to then it gets to the point where they've booked a meeting and then I step in.
Absolutely.
But I said, well, can you speed it up and slow? And he said, yeah, you can. So you can put settings on it of how fast you want it to go or how slow, which I thought was quite interesting, because what you wouldn't want to do is it break the company to the point where you've got all these meetings booked and then you've lost where you are and you then actually can't deliver on what you've promised in all these conversations.
I think you're going to use AI to scale things like that.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure you've got the capacity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You've got to be able to deal with the scalability of that. You've also got to know when the human touch point needs to come in as well. Tom, great conversation. Thank you for coming in today.
Graham. Thank you, Diane. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for sharing something with us. Next time we need more jokes, though. Folks,
Pleasure.
thank you for being part of the conversation as well. Thank you for listening wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We will be back soon with more conversations from DCT. Until then, from Tom, from Diane and myself, thanks for listening. Bye for now.
See you soon.